Welcome to Living in Connection, where we explore the nature of physical and non-physical reality and what that means in your life.
Well, welcome back. We just had a very interesting discussion about sin and other related things, and I'm Dirk Dunning.
I'm Frank DeMarco, and we haven't seen the end of the subject. We didn't quite finish.
Oh, no, we didn't. And so where are we going from here?
Well, I think I want to start with the reminder that all this thing about sin and virtues, it all hinges on choice, because the guys have said from the very beginning, what we're here in 3D to do is to create ourselves by choosing and choosing and choosing and choosing. And in what they talked to with us, in one of the books one of the books that I have published, they talked about it in that context, that sin and virtue they were not talking about it in a theistic manner. They're not talking about God. They're not talking about God and the devil. They're not talking about these were the commandments and you will either, follow them or you won't. But they were saying they're looking at it as process. And so at one point, if I'm not mistaken, they went through the various virtues and they showed why each virtue, it not only has to be a choice, you have to climb to it, but why it was one of the main virtues. And they showed the sins, and they said, any way that you can miss the mark, which is their definition of sinning, is always a slide. It's never a climb. And they said every form there is can be sort of crammed into one of the 7 major categories. That's why why the church fathers and others came up with those categories. So if we can remember that we're really ultimately talking about the process of choice, which is our process of self-creation, then a lot of people's worry that we're going to sneak God in the back door, or worse, we're going to sneak religion in the back door, might go away a little bit, and they can actually listen to what we're saying, because what we're saying is not it's not pietistic, and neither is it sort of abstract and airy-fairy. I don't think it sounds very practical to me. Now let's see if you guys want to say anything. Go ahead.
Well, first, from my own perspective, the thing I've recognized my whole life is I realized very early on, the questions I was asking amounted to asking myself, who am I? Not who am I in a general sense, but what do I value? What do I believe? What is my core of my being? And that's where things like responsibility came in. And what it became was a thing early in my life where I had decided certain things, or at least I felt that I had, about myself. And having figured out who I was in those aspects, at least, I could never do something contrary to those because those are not me. It just didn't make any sense at all. It's like the idea of sin in that sense of, doing something that was a violation. It's not a violation against God. It's not a violation against others. It's a violation against me. It's me violating myself.
You never had cross currents within you that had led you to do things that part of you knew wasn't the right thing to do, but the overwhelming urge was to do the other?
Not really.
Wow. I envy.
In terms of temptation, there were things, but then what I would end up doing is I would reflect that back into myself of, who am I really? What do I want here? Where am I in the world? What is this? And then once I had an answer to that, I could act accordingly.
Well, now you see, there's a difference between us. Not the only one, but it's a big one. And that is consciousness. you have an enviable, assuming that you're not lying to me, you have an enviable
Of course.
self-awareness from an early age, which I did not have. And in my case, the urges would come up and I would follow them without even thinking. And I never did that kind of analysis and I didn't even know that I wasn't self-aware until Rita wrote the preface to Sphere and Hologram. And she said, Frank doesn't seem to enjoy self-reflection. That's the first time I even thought about it. So that's a major difference between us. But you are, in general, a thinking machine. And I am, in general, a feeling machine. It's not at all that simple, but there is that. All right. And so go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no, and that's actually, you went to I think what is the key difference is that, and I've thought a lot about this, about emotion at one level, feeling at another level, moods and temperaments at another level yet, and how those work within the mind and how the thought processes all interrelate with that. And it's what I think internal to myself is that, in comparing myself to others, is it's like I have a different level of set points of certain things, that it requires much more to trigger something where I end up in an emotional space.
I don't hear that you have a lot of cross currents. And that's
not
fortunate in a
often.
way. Yeah, well, mine in life is nothing but cross currents. So I mean that's
And I've seen this in people all around me, and it's like they're being battered on the beach against the rocks, man. And it's like, wow, what a difficult way to live.
It is difficult. And now difficult can be productive, or it can just be difficult. I think it was Alan Greenspan said, sometimes a kick in the pants will get you started. Sometimes it just hurts. Well, all right. So do your guys want to chime in before we ask my guys? And we also have to figure out what it is we want to ask.
Let's see. Just let them speak. Yes, Frank, where you went is almost right about where Dirk is in relation to you, in the differences in how you process information, how you process your being. They're pretty fundamental differences, but they're not even the poles of what exists within people around the world. There are a lot of people who process even in different ways than the two of you do. And the number of variations is quite large. And
Give us some
one of the
extremes.
things, I'm sorry?
Give us some extremes if you can. Examples.
Well, some extremes occur with folks who consider themselves extremely pious to the point of self-abuse. Others occur in those who end up being what you would think of as sociopathic or psychopathic, where their processing capabilities have been severely distorted in ways that are damaging. Others yet are very confused internally because their processing methodologies are not coherent. Others yet have problems where the processing is different, and it's not about coherence, but the processing is so different that they're overwhelmed by sensory input from the world. Some of these you'd refer to as ADHD and related kinds of things. And these are processing difficulties. They're not wrong, they're not bad, they're just different. And there are reasons for them. There are others yet that are in extreme isolation, that they are pursuing paths where the input causes such a strong internal reaction that their tendency is to tamp everything down to where there is no input. And so they have a tendency to live lives as hermits and whatnot, and to be completely removed from society in all kinds of different ways. Some may be in the middle of society and you don't see that they're isolated, though they are, if you stop and think about how they behave. They choose to disconnect in one or many different ways from society.
And that makes sense. We'll work on the assumption that all of these have their place in the life, or they wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And as you say, no right, no wrong, different. But by the way that you describe that, it does make the differences between Dirk and me seem smaller. We're closer to being. We're closer to being, I would say, on the mystical end of consciousness, but not to the degree of a true mystic, we're in that direction. If that's
More than
probably
that, your values are closely aligned.
yes, yeah, well, that's
And
true.
that's more important yet.
All right, okay. And anything beyond? I know I interrupted you in the middle there. Anything else?
That's fine.
Okay.
Not at the moment, I don't think. No.
Yeah, no, that's all right. So ask the guys, what do we want to know?
I think where they're pointing back to is you started off with choice, and that's a good starting point. That in choosing and in knowing that you're choosing and in knowing the process by which you are evaluating to be able to choose, you end up
Okay.
changing who you are.
Okay, now remember this, or rather, let's look at this in terms that no one looks at it in. Remember that all versions exist. So it isn't just a matter either of choosing yes or no. It's a matter of choosing blue or green or orange or white or yellow or ultraviolet or whatever. So there are many, many, many variants. Theoretically, from a higher point of view, all those paths are taken because they are possible. All possible paths are filled. You don't know any but one. You may at some point change and you're on a new one, and that'll either seem to you like the only one you ever were on, or you might even remember changing, but you still only experience one at a time, except in the times such as you experienced yourself, where you felt things changing, you were actually above the level of the paths, and you were seeing that there are more than one. The reason we mention this is it's so easy to say, here's a choice to be made. There is a right choice and a wrong choice. Maybe there are many right choices and many wrong choices, but right and wrong. And we don't really see right or wrong. We see this or that. We see desirable or otherwise. We see straight or crooked, but perhaps it would help everyone for you to realize that no matter what the choices were, you took all of them. And that should, if any of you are consumed with guilt, as an example, that might alleviate that a little bit. Or if you feel really not nostalgic, but whatever the word is, the path's not taken and you really wish you had taken them. Again, it's understandable. Nobody can take but one path in one particular path, but in an overall sense, it's like you are all probability cloud of all these things having been done, all taken. And that probability cloud does not collapse until you lose the body. At which point it doesn't so much collapse as becomes seen as this sphere of all possibilities. And think of it as a dream. This is how it would have been this way. This is how it would have been this way. This is how it would have been this. Only instead of would have been, it was is. Well, all right.
Well,
that's all.
And as I've described before, if you live that in the current present reality, it's very confusing. If you have timelines that become fractured where you jump from one to another, it is very disorienting.
That's just a matter of learning. You're in a situation where it's going to become more and more common not because the universe has changed, but because your ability to float above the level has changed, has developed. But all of this is only preliminary because really it is background to saying why we want to talk about the sins and the virtues. Since it's not a matter of guilt or satisfaction, and it's not a matter of it's not even a matter of desirable and undesirable effects, given that all choices are going to be made one way or the other, but it is you. How can we put this? Supposing you look at yourself when you're born, regardless of what you're born with, as all potential. And as time goes on, you choose and choose and choose and choose. Following the sins reduces your amount of potential, perhaps. Climbing to the virtues increases your amount of potential, perhaps. We're saying perhaps because we don't want to be able to have it distorted as sin leads you downward and virtues lead you upward. Well, sort of, but only sort of. It changes the flavor of things. And there is a saying in the Hebrew Bible somewhere that even though your sins are as scarlet, you can rise above them, meaning you can miraculously transform what you are. It's not a matter of accounting. It isn't like, oh, I have done 14 things and I have to make 14 atonements. It's, oh, I changed. I'm no longer that person, and you move from there. Well, we would say the sins taken as a group are a form of we would call it a description of a group of tendencies that reduce your choices, that reduce your potential. And the virtues are the paths that may give you greater foothold, as you climb. They may give you more power, really. So that being said, and it's not this simple, of course, but we have to pare it down. That being said, if you know that you have a besetting sin, just say one, and it's anger, all right? And you just really, everything sets you off. That anger is stopping you. It could be looked at as a complex of robots that continually sabotage what you really want to be. It isn't like you're going to be punished for having those robots. The robots are the punishment. The sin is the punishment, in that it is detracting from your potential. If you practice temperance or fortitude or justice, and you make it a value, you work at it, and you continually try. Every time you fall off the path, you get back on the path and try again. It's going to have an effect. This is the same way. This is one form of cause and effect that really can't be evaded. Now, you can't say, here's a person who's had all these sins and they've been slid down all these things. They have no self-control, blah, 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 blah. They're hopeless. You don't know that. The world is full of saints who used to be fabulous sinners. We don't mean fabulous meaning great. We mean great amount. And it's almost a form of excess. A saint may be considered someone who reached excess virtue, possibly through the route of excess vice. We don't think that's very clear, but that's as far as we're going to go at the moment. It's not a matter of accounting, and it's not a matter of some court of law. It is, these things are helpful to you, these things are not helpful to you. But having said all of that, nobody can tell you ahead of time which ones will match your particular set of characteristics. It could be that you're very even-tempered and not even-tempered. It could be you're very indecisive and you're very, you go along with things and all of this, and a little bit of anger actually will be good for you. It's not good and it is good. You understand what we're saying. Life is not simple. Life is complex. And we're going to stop there, but perhaps I gave you a start.
It is. Well, particularly for me, it's interesting, as Frank was saying earlier, I have much less of the cross currents going on inside myself. So my perspective of this has been different, and not having the feelings internally because of not having those cross currents, it's been hard sometimes to understand what I'm seeing and what's happening. And so this discussion helps me to get a better understanding from an internal perspective of what others are going through and what's driving those various processes. And that's really helpful.
Good. But I think very few people would understand a life of very few cross currents and would regard it as very fortunate. Now,
they'd also find it very strange. And that's not surprising either.
Sure. No, it's literally strange because they're not accustomed to it. Now, that doesn't mean it's good or bad, any of it. And then perhaps they've beaten that to death. I mean, it's all grist for the mill. It's all, In fact, they're wanting to carry this a little farther, but I don't know, this may be too far. They're saying they're going to take the concept of karma, and rather than put it to an individual, given that they think that individuals are largely fiction anyway, that we're much more interconnected rather than units, they're saying karma could be considered to be the group's unfinished business, not just any one individual's unfinished business. Therefore, it could wind up being redistributed anywhere. You, Dirk, your besetting sin is you were a scientist and an engineer, and we're going to get you for that. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
it could work that way, but it doesn't.
Where actually my guys were showing me something that I'm not clear on yet, but it was basically that a part of what my path has been where I can experience these, in some cases, it's being aware of them, but not being part of them, of these other pathways of life.
Yes.
Other paths not taken. And in a few cases, like we talked about a time ago, is where I have literal memory of two of them occurring at the same time, which that is just really confusing. And it isn't a thing where one is real and one is fiction. They both happened, but
no.
Anyway, it's confusing. But what they were showing me was that if I had the cross currents going on that are pounding me back and forth off the walls of myself, where I'm caught in that, it's a little bit like having a car with wobbly wheels trying to stay on a road when you have multiple paths. It becomes very difficult.
For the first time, I'm hearing that the cross currents, oh, come on. I can't, come on, I just had it. Oh, yes. You know what the cross currents detract from is continuity. And if you have few cross currents, continuity is much easier. You can go much further as you're doing. For some of us,
and you can sense more.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, for me, continuity has always been a problem. It doesn't matter if I have notes on my desk. I still will wake up in the morning and not remember what I was doing yesterday, that I want to continue with, even like talking to the guys, and often they've had to come up with it because I'm like, I don't know. Even if I look at it again, I don't remember where it was going, So I know that's alien.
That also explains something else, is that one of the things my dad and I did, we talked all of my life, and we would talk about some topic, and for some reason we would end it in an evening or whatever. And we might 20 or 30 years later pick it up almost in mid-sentence where we ended and continue on.
That does not surprise me. What are you taking it to be?
Well, what I'm realizing is because we both had this where we didn't have that internal conflict occurring, those threads are clean. They're easy to find. Whereas had we had the internal turmoil, it's like having a huge noise level going on in your mind. It's hard to find those threads. At least I think that's what it's like.
I'm not sure about that. I see where you're going, though, and let me think about that. And maybe I'll come up with a clarity on this. But I do see the connection, though. Now, I know that I can sometimes remember even whole discussions that I've had 30, 40, 50 years ago. And of course, as old as I'm getting, that's easier than last week because short-term memory, doesn't do as well. But I don't know yet what the common denominator would be, other than the fact that I was interested. Why should I remember that and not this? It's like when you dream, as I did last night, and you dream of something that happened 50 years ago. You may not know why you dreamed of that. And today, I still don't know why I dreamed of it. I'm assuming it wasn't at random, but I'm also, I don't know. I have to wait and see. No, okay, now here's another distinction between us. I wait, see, and I say, okay, I'll take what comes. And I think you tend to plan more. You say, this is what I want. And it's hard for me to know what to want.
I plan, but it's tentative. It's like, here's a suite of potentials, and they're all there, and I'm aware of them. Which ones I do or don't pick up is another matter. Yes. And so they may lay there for 20 and 30 years before I pick them up again.
think we're looking at some variants of self-awareness, and that may be another thing to talk about at some length. We have a little bit of time yet. Did we, thinking about this, where did we go today? Did we leave this unfinished?
Well, we started with choice, and we wandered through many aspects of that. I think the big thing for anybody who's listening would be, how might they internalize the idea of choice to be able to use it to create who they really are? In thinking about sins, vices, virtues, or who their being is, how is this useful for them?
I think if we can do it, it might be worthwhile another time, not now, to list the way the guys said sins affect us and the way the virtues affect us. I might have to find that in one of the books, if I can even find it, But I remember them spelling it out, and it was quite clear. But although I came up with, as usual, I know what the end result is, but I couldn't tell you the steps that got us there. So, but maybe we'll try that if I can find that. I'm waiting for my past life review so I can find out what happened while I was here.
Yeah, well, we all are for that. It's like there is so much, and it's like, why did that happen? Why did it go this way? You were talking about, I forget what it was, something just a bit ago, and it had to do with people in your life and things and events that happen and why they're there. And what I've had happen over the past month is several times where particular people and events have come to mind, and I wasn't quite sure what that was about. And one of them in particular was some events involving a very dear girlfriend of mine from long ago who passed away, and a friend of hers. And in thinking about that for the better part of a week, I kept thinking, maybe I'm supposed to get in touch. And then she sent an email around. It happens that she is a practicing psychic, and she sent an email around about sessions and whatnot. Haven't heard from her in 15 years. And yet, here the two were simultaneously, they linked. But I've had many of those that have happened.
Yeah, that doesn't seem hard to me. I mean, the inside and the outside being linked and us all being connected, it would be easy. But then our view of the world is not exactly common.
No, but it goes back to your theme about awareness, and that is, I think, critically important.
Yeah. Many of the guys' criticisms of the way we live have sort of boiled down to, you're spending all your time thinking the outside world is realer than the inside world, which is ridiculous. It is ridiculous when you think of it, but the outside world looks like it always was here, it's always going to be here, and we're just visitors. But obviously the only thing we really know is our inside world, and everything else is rumor. You're a very persistent rumor, I got to tell you. Anyway.
Well, that takes me back to a party that my folks had when I was a teenager. That it was a bunch of folks from my dad's office that they had a big party with, all the folks and their spouses and whatnot. And I remember talking to this one guy, and he had a view of the world that I could not comprehend hardly. And what became very clear very quickly is that as far as he was concerned, the world existed entirely for him, and it was only the things that were right in front of him that he could see that existed, that anything behind him didn't exist until he turned around to see it.
Psychologically, he's right. But yeah, you're right. It doesn't make any sense otherwise. But psychologically, he's not wrong. I'm glad I'm not stuck in his life, however, or I'm not stuck in his mind.
Yeah. Well, trying to figure out the world from that perspective would be interesting.
There's a theory that many psychopaths actually regard nobody else as being actually alive. It's like everybody else's puppets. Now, I don't know. It's hard to imagine that, but that's what they say.
I don't know.
All right.
Well, next time we probably wandered into a corner, so we probably should stop here and then consider where we're going next.
Actually, I think we're doing fairly well. And the sense I'm getting from the guys is we'll do a little more plodding along and we'll get somewhere. We'll see.
All right.
All right. Thank you for your able assistance as usual.
Again, thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Yeah, too.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, please press like. Please press subscribe to stay informed of new episodes as they appear. We would love to hear from you in the comments section below, and we wish you the very best in connecting with your own guidance.